The soft glow of Christmas lights bathed the Ramsey family's Colorado home in a warm, almost magical light. Outside, the snow lay thick and untouched, muffling the suburban quiet. Inside, the house was a carefully curated stage of festive perfection. The scent of cinnamon candles mingled with the faint aroma of sugar cookies, and in the living room, the Christmas tree sparkled with hundreds of twinkling lights, each ornament meticulously placed. Among the gifts, a little girl moved with bright-eyed excitement. 6-year-old JonBenét Ramsey, tiny and precocious, with her long golden hair tied in a neat bow, laughed as she tore open presents with a practiced grace. Her parents, John and Patsy Ramsey, watched with smiles that hinted at pride tinged with the fatigue of raising a child so far in the public eye. The morning, however, would not remain serene. What began as a seemingly ordinary Christmas in a well-to-do neighborhood of Boulder would unravel into one of the most chilling and infamous cases in American history. Patsy Ramsey, still in her silk robe, stepped into the kitchen to retrieve her morning coffee. Her eyes flicked to the hallway that led to the basement, a space that had always been JonBenét's playground, the site of countless games, laughter, and innocent mischief. The floorboards creaked underfoot as she moved, a familiar sound in an otherwise calm house. But that morning, something felt different, though she could not yet articulate why. Her instincts tightened as she noticed something on the staircase, a piece of paper folded and placed in an almost deliberate manner. Curious, she picked it up. The handwriting was jagged, hurried, and yet careful. She began to read aloud, her voice catching in the crisp morning air. A ransom note demanding $118,000 for the safe return of her daughter. The words were chilling, the tone ominous. The note detailed knowledge of the family's finances, their routines, and even intimate details of the household. Patsy's hands trembled as the reality hit her. John Ramsey, alerted by his wife's panicked call, rushed from upstairs. The festive morning was abruptly replaced by a tense, desperate energy. Questions flew faster than answers. Who could have written the note? How had they gained access to such intimate knowledge? Should they involve the police immediately or try to handle this quietly out of fear for JonBenét's safety? In those first moments, the Ramseys' world shifted from domestic bliss to the edge of an unspeakable horror. By the time law enforcement arrived, the house had transformed. Neighbors had begun to gather, curiosity and fear mingling with the crisp winter air. Patrol cars parked outside, their flashing lights reflecting off the snow, painting the front lawn in red and blue hues. For officers, the scene was both routine and unsettling. A missing child call could escalate into something horrific in moments, and there was the added complexity of the ransom note. As the family answered questions, the investigators began the delicate process of examining the house. In the living room, presents lay strewn across the floor, wrapping paper ripped and crumpled. JonBenét's small shoes sat by the tree, perfectly positioned as if she had just stepped away for a moment. Every detail mattered, every footprint, every door that had been opened or left ajar. The police treated the house as both a crime scene and a living diary, each object a potential clue. Hours stretched into a tense blur. The initial hope that JonBenet might be safely retrieved began to fade. As the investigation unfolded, officers noticed inconsistencies that would haunt the case for decades. The note's handwriting seemed almost rehearsed, the demands strangely precise. Neighbors' testimonies added more layers of confusion. Some reported strange sounds in the night, others noted unfamiliar cars in the area. Nothing was concrete, yet the undercurrent of dread grew heavier with every passing minute. Then came the discovery that would shock the nation. JonBenét's body was found in the basement, hidden beneath a blanket, her small frame motionless. The discovery was both heartbreaking and terrifying. A joyful morning had turned into a tableau of horror, and the Ramseys were immediately thrust into the center of a media storm that would never let them go. Cameras swarmed the neighborhood, flashing relentlessly, capturing every tear, every expression of grief. Headlines screamed with speculation. Was it an intruder, a family member, someone obsessed with the child's pageant life? For the public, the details trickled out slowly, each revelation darker than the last. The Ramseys' wealth and prominence, once symbols of stability and success, now became points of suspicion. Detectives carefully documented every corner of the house, every strand of hair, every fingerprint. Yet for all their meticulous work, answers remained frustratingly elusive. The ransom note provided no traceable fingerprints. The basement yielded few clues beyond the chilling scene itself. And then came the first wave of speculation. Law enforcement faced a media frenzy that threatened to overshadow facts. Television anchors repeated every rumor, neighborhood gossip took on a life of its own, and public opinion swung wildly from sympathy to suspicion. Experts were called in to analyze the handwriting, the timing, and even psychological profiles of potential suspects. For the audience, the mystery was no longer about the family alone. It had become a puzzle of human nature, greed, and darkness. As night fell on that fateful Christmas day, the Ramseys sat in their living room, once a place of joy, now filled with an unbearable weight. The cheerful glow of the tree seemed grotesque against the horror that had unfolded. The house, a sanctuary moments before, had become a stage for tragedy and intrigue, its walls holding secrets that the world would obsess over for years to come. The first part of the story closes on a chilling note. A child gone, a family scrutinized, a nation shocked, and a question hanging in the air that would never leave. Who could commit such a crime? The answer remained hidden, obscured by layers of confusion, misdirection, and tragedy. And as the cameras faded, the lights dimmed, and the snow settled quietly outside, one thing was certain: nothing in Boulder or the world would ever be the same again. The morning after JonBenét's death, Boulder was no longer a quiet suburban town. The streets around the Ramsey residence were a hive of activity. Police cars with flashing lights, uniformed officers and detectives in plain clothes moved with precision and urgency. News helicopters circled overhead, their cameras capturing every angle of the house, every glimpse of the family through curtained windows. The world had arrived at the doorstep of one of the most puzzling and chilling child murders in American history. Inside the Ramsey home, investigators began the painstaking process of reconstructing what had happened. Every detail mattered. The living room, once filled with laughter and Christmas cheer, was now marked with colored evidence tags. Officers measured the distance between furniture, inspected footprints in the soft carpet, and documented any object that could potentially hold a clue. The basement, where JonBenét's body had been discovered, became the focus of intense scrutiny. Detectives walked its cold concrete floor again and again, photographing every angle, searching for the invisible threads that might lead to the killer. John and Patsy Ramsey were no longer simply grieving parents. They had become central figures in a complex and unforgiving investigation. Every word they spoke was analyzed, every gesture noted. Detectives tried to separate genuine grief from potential deception. The questions were relentless. Where were you during the evening? Who had access to the house? Did you hear or see anything unusual? Each answer the Ramseys gave was dissected under the harsh light of suspicion. Meanwhile, forensic specialists examined the ransom note. Handwriting experts studied the slant, pressure, and formation of each letter. The note was strange, meticulous in some ways, careless in others. It mentioned a specific sum, $118,000, which coincidentally aligned with John Ramsey's recent bonus at work. Experts debated whether the writer had insider knowledge, possibly someone close to the family, or if it was a carefully crafted attempt to mislead investigators. The DNA evidence collected from JonBenét's clothing and the basement was equally confounding. Early tests suggested the presence of an unknown male DNA, but the sample was degraded and incomplete. For detectives, this was both a glimmer of hope and a source of frustration. The evidence hinted at someone outside the family, yet it was never enough to identify a concrete suspect. Every lead seemed tantalizingly close, then slipped away like shadows in the night. The media played an enormous role in shaping the narrative of the case. Television crews camped outside the Ramsey home, reporters peering into windows, repeating every rumor they could find. Headlines screamed suspicion, speculation, and scandal. The story became a spectacle, each new detail magnified into an event of national fascination. For the public, the case was no longer just a murder. It was a puzzle, a moral trial, and a story of wealth, privilege, and potential deception. Neighbors' accounts added layers of confusion. Some recalled seeing a mysterious figure near the Ramsey residence on the night of the murder, though no one could provide a clear description. Others remembered hearing a scream, then silence. One neighbor reported an unfamiliar car parked nearby, its headlights off, while another insisted they had seen lights flickering in the basement. The conflicting testimonies created a haze of uncertainty, making it difficult for investigators to distinguish fact from imagination. The tension between investigators and the family intensified. Some officers began to view John and Patsy with suspicion, interpreting nervous glances and odd behavior as signs of guilt. The Ramseys, in turn, felt increasingly cornered, frustrated by the relentless scrutiny. The home that had once been a sanctuary now felt like a trap, its walls echoing with judgment and unanswered questions. Meanwhile, amateur sleuths and conspiracy theorists began to fill the void left by official uncertainty. Magazines published speculative articles, talk shows debated potential suspects, theories proliferated. Could it have been an intruder, a pedophile, or a disgruntled acquaintance? Or, shockingly, could the crime have been committed by someone within the household? Each new hypothesis sparked heated debate, both online and offline, keeping the story alive in the public consciousness. As the investigation continued, forensic psychologists and criminal profilers were called in to create profiles of potential suspects. They examined the crime scene with meticulous attention, noting the staging of JonBenét's body, the peculiar placement of the ransom note, and the timing of events. Their analyses suggested a range of possibilities: an opportunistic intruder, someone familiar with the home, or an individual with a deep psychological fixation on JonBenét herself. Yet, despite their expertise, no definitive conclusions could be reached. Red herrings complicated the investigation further. Burke Ramsey, JonBenét's older brother, became a focus of suspicion in some quarters due to ambiguous statements and a childlike confusion that adults misinterpreted. Friends and acquaintances of the family were questioned repeatedly, but their testimonies often contradicted one another. Every lead seemed to open another door of uncertainty, leaving investigators and the public alike in a constant state of unease. The atmosphere in Boulder became almost surreal. The streets were alive with curiosity seekers and journalists. Helicopters hovered like predators over snow-covered roofs. The Ramseys' lives were scrutinized as never before. Even routine activities, shopping for groceries, walking the dog, became spectacles. The line between investigation and intrusion blurred, feeding tension and mistrust. Yet, amid the chaos, law enforcement clung to methodical discipline. They reconstructed timelines, tested alibis, and retraced the movements of every household member. Slowly, patterns began to emerge, but each was immediately complicated by conflicting evidence. The unknown male DNA remained a tantalizing clue. The handwriting on the ransom note defied conclusive analysis. The physical evidence in the basement suggested both an intruder and possible staging. It was as if the crime itself had been crafted to baffle, to hide the truth in plain sight. As Part 2 concludes, the case grows murkier. Investigators face a maze of evidence, suspicion, and conflicting accounts. The Ramseys remain under intense scrutiny, their grief compounded by doubt and public judgment. For the audience, the tension is palpable, the mystery deepens, the suspects multiply, and the truth seems ever elusive. Every detail is significant, every contradiction a potential key. And yet, despite exhaustive efforts, the question hangs in the air like a specter. Who really killed JonBenét Ramsey? The shadows grow longer, the night colder, and the world watches, waiting for answers that may never come. Months had passed since the tragic discovery of JonBenét Ramsey. The initial shock of her death had rippled outward into a relentless storm of public scrutiny, media coverage, and police investigation. Yet, despite exhaustive efforts, the case had not moved closer to resolution. The question that haunted investigators, journalists, and the nation remained the same. Who could commit such a cruel act? Detectives returned repeatedly to the Ramsey residence, examining every corner of the house, every piece of furniture, and every inch of carpeting. They sought patterns, inconsistencies, anything that might provide clarity. Yet the more they investigated, the more convoluted the story became. The basement, the scene of the crime, yielded some clues, but few definitive answers. Its cold concrete floor and shadowed corners seemed almost designed to confuse. A strand of hair not matching any family member, a smudge on the stairwell, the carefully staged positioning of the body. Each element suggested multiple possibilities, but confirmed none. Amid this uncertainty, criminal profilers were called in, offering a new lens through which to view the crime. Their analyses were meticulous and psychologically intricate. The staging of JonBenét's body, they noted, suggested someone who wanted to control not just the act, but the perception of it. The ransom note, long scrutinized for handwriting analysis, appeared oddly sophisticated in some places and childish in others. Was it written by someone familiar with the family, or was it an elaborate misdirection designed to implicate them? Profilers considered each scenario, constructing detailed behavioral profiles that both intrigued and frustrated investigators. Meanwhile, public interest intensified. The media, sensing an endless supply of speculation, amplified every possible theory. Every small detail, Burke Ramsey's bedroom layout, a neighbor's offhand comment, the pattern of phone calls to the Ramsey house was magnified into evidence. Talk shows, news outlets, and magazine articles dissected each new revelation, some more sensational than accurate. Public opinion swung wildly, sometimes in favor of the family, sometimes against them. In homes across the nation, viewers debated the plausibility of an intruder versus the possibility that someone inside the house was responsible. Amid the swirl of theories, new forensic technologies began to emerge, offering fresh hope for answers. Investigators re-examined DNA samples collected from the scene. Early tests had identified the presence of male DNA that did not match any family members, suggesting the possibility of an unknown intruder. Yet the sample was degraded, and it did not match any profiles in criminal databases. The evidence tantalized investigators, but refused to yield a conclusive identification. Theories multiplied like shadows in the night. One line of thought suggested a professional intruder, someone who knew the house and the family's routines. Another posited an obsessed fan or acquaintance from JonBenét's pageant life. Some investigators, compelled by patterns of behavior and timing, considered the possibility of a family member, however difficult that reality was to imagine. Each theory had compelling arguments and glaring weaknesses. Each created suspense and uncertainty, keeping the public, and even the investigators themselves, on edge. As pressure mounted, new investigators joined the case, bringing fresh perspectives and renewed scrutiny. Each re-examination seemed to uncover minor inconsistencies, statements made weeks earlier that didn't align perfectly with evidence, physical traces in the house that could be interpreted in multiple ways. With each new theory, the line between fact and conjecture blurred. The case became a labyrinth, a puzzle with pieces that refused to fit together neatly. The Ramseys themselves lived under constant watch. Their public appearances, though rare, were scrutinized for signs of guilt or deception. Every statement was dissected, every gesture analyzed. The weight of suspicion hung over them like a cloud, unrelenting and oppressive. Meanwhile, their private grief continued, unrelieved by public curiosity or investigative pressure. They had lost their daughter in the most horrific of ways, and yet the world demanded answers, leaving them trapped between mourning and defense. In parallel, investigators explored every possible external connection. Friends of the family, neighbors, and acquaintances from JonBenét's pageant world were interviewed repeatedly. New leads emerged, only to fade quickly when evidence failed to support them. Mysterious phone calls, unaccounted-for visitors, and sporadic sightings of unknown individuals fueled speculation. Yet, despite the seeming abundance of potential leads, none could be verified. Each path led to a dead end, each clue a shadow of a solution that never fully revealed itself. By now, the case had taken on almost mythic proportions. Documentaries and books attempted to reconstruct the timeline, analyzing JonBenét's last hours, the family's activities, and the precise timing of events. Fans, amateur sleuth, and true crime enthusiasts debated endlessly. Some insisted that the family was responsible, others argued fervently for an intruder. Social media, forums, and call-in shows became virtual battlefields for competing narratives. Every new development, no matter how minor, reignited the debate. In this atmosphere, the forensic evidence remained central. The male DNA from the basement hinted at a stranger but was never conclusive. The ransom note's handwriting was analyzed by dozens of experts, each arriving at slightly different conclusions. Was it Patsy's handwriting disguised, a family member's attempt to mislead, or an outsider's careful ruse? Each analysis was layered with uncertainty, leaving investigators with multiple plausible scenarios, but no definitive answers. By the end of this period, the case had reached a tense equilibrium. The investigation was exhaustive but inconclusive, media attention was relentless, and public fascination had become almost unbearable. For viewers and readers following the case, the story was as much about human psychology, media influence, and the elusiveness of truth as it was about a single tragic death. The tension was relentless, every detail pregnant with potential significance, every lead a thread in a web that refused to be untangled. The climax of Part 3 lies not in resolution, but in heightened suspense. The profiles, theories, and forensic analyses converged into a single realization. The truth was hidden, perhaps forever, behind layers of misdirection, media frenzy, and human error. Investigators were forced to acknowledge the possibility that the crime could never be conclusively solved, that the killer might remain unknown. And for the public, the story of JonBenét Ramsey was no longer a simple tragedy. It had become a cautionary tale about obsession, speculation, and the murky line between fact and fiction. As Part 3 closes, the audience is left suspended in uncertainty. Every theory collides with another, every lead opens new questions, and the case, far from resolved, grows ever more mysterious. The tension is at its peak. The killer remains unidentified, the family remains under scrutiny, and the haunting question endures. Who really killed JonBenét Ramsey? The shadows lengthen, secrets fester, and the world waits, unable to look away from a tragedy that is as mesmerizing as it is devastating. Years had passed since that fateful Christmas morning in 1996, yet the world had not forgotten JonBenét Ramsey. The little girl's death had transformed from a local tragedy into a national obsession, and for many it had become emblematic of the darkest corners of human nature. The investigation, exhaustive and relentless, had failed to deliver definitive answers. The shadows of doubt and suspicion still lingered, stretching across families, law enforcement, and a captivated public. The Ramsey family, once emblematic of affluence and normalcy, had become permanent figures in the public imagination, figures both pitied and scrutinized. John and Patsy Ramsey, their grief compounded by suspicion, lived under a microscope. Every appearance, every statement was analyzed, dissected, and replayed in the relentless echo chamber of media coverage. Burke Ramsey, JonBenét's older brother, remained in the background, his childhood forever overshadowed by tragedy and controversy. Despite the passing years, new generations of journalists, forensic scientists, and true crime enthusiasts were drawn into the story. Each new documentary, podcast, or article reignited debate, introducing fresh interpretations and renewed speculation. The story, once a shocking headline, had become a cultural touchstone, a case study in human obsession, media sensationalism, and the elusiveness of truth. For law enforcement, the case remained both a haunting failure and a continuous challenge. Investigators revisited evidence repeatedly, applying new forensic technologies as they emerged. DNA testing advanced dramatically, allowing samples that were once inconclusive to be re-examined with unprecedented precision. Yet even these technological leaps failed to reveal the killer conclusively. The male DNA found on JonBenét's clothing suggested an intruder, yet no match could be made in national databases. Other forensic clues, once promising, yielded ambiguous or conflicting results. Every new lead brought hope, and then frustration. Public fascination persisted. Forums, fan theories, and social media threads dissected every detail, debating plausibility with fervor. Was the crime committed by a family member, a stranger, or someone who slipped unnoticed into the house? Could the staged elements of the crime scene provide insight into the killer's mindset? Every argument was amplified, each theory evolving with new speculation. The case had become a mirror, reflecting the fears, obsessions, and analytical compulsions of society itself. One enduring question haunted everyone involved. Why had JonBenét been killed? Psychologists and criminal profilers continued to offer hypotheses. Some argued the crime was opportunistic, the act of a disturbed intruder who seized the chance presented by an unlocked home or a distracted family. Others posited an intimate motive, someone connected to the family or the child herself. Each theory was plausible, each backed by fragments of evidence, yet none provided closure. The media's role in shaping the narrative of the case was as influential as the evidence itself. Sensational headlines turned the Ramseys into figures of suspicion before a trial could ever take place. The relentless coverage blurred the line between reporting and entertainment, between fact and conjecture. Public perception, fueled by rumors and expert commentary, often ran ahead of the investigation, adding pressure and confusion. For many viewers, the fascination with the case was inseparable from the frustration of its ambiguity. Over time, the case influenced both law enforcement and public policy. Investigators learned new lessons about preserving evidence, handling media scrutiny, and managing the delicate interplay between family cooperation and suspicion. Child protection advocates studied the case as a cautionary tale, emphasizing the importance of immediate response, clear protocols, and community awareness. The legacy of JonBenét's death extended beyond grief. It shaped how society approached the investigation of child crimes. Despite the passage of decades, unresolved questions remained as vivid as ever. Every forensic clue, witness statement, and media report continued to be examined, reinterpreted, and debated. Experts revisited the ransom note, the DNA, and the peculiar circumstances of JonBenét's death. Each re-examination reminded the world that in some ways the case was as alive now as it had been on that shocking Christmas morning. For the public, the story carried a dual fascination: the tragedy of a lost child and the puzzle of an unsolved crime. True crime enthusiasts dissected timelines, analyzed family dynamics, and compared forensic findings. Some maintained faith in the intruder theory, others believed the answer lay closer to home. No matter the stance, the narrative captivated audiences, offering both horror and intrigue, grief and fascination. In the Ramsey home, the ghosts of the past lingered silently. The rooms that had once echoed with laughter and holiday cheer now held only memory and loss. The family's grief, compounded by years of speculation and scrutiny, never fully abated. The world watched, debated, and theorized, but no one could restore what was lost or fill the void left by JonBenét's absence. As Part 4 concludes, the chilling truth of the story becomes clear. Some mysteries are resistant to closure. The case of JonBenét Ramsey is one of those tragedies that refuses to fit neatly into a narrative of justice or resolution. Investigators, journalists, and the public may continue to search for answers, but the ultimate truth remains elusive, hidden somewhere in the shadows between evidence and speculation. The haunting legacy of JonBenét's story lies not only in the crime itself, but in the questions it raises about innocence, human curiosity, and the consequences of a society obsessed with uncovering the truth. Her death reminds us of the fragility of life, the complexity of human behavior, and the chilling reality that some answers may never come. And so, decades after a Christmas morning turned nightmare, JonBenét Ramsey's story continues to grip the nation, a mystery unresolved, a tragedy that endures, and a haunting question that will echo through history. Who really killed JonBenét Ramsey? The lights of Boulder may shine softly on winter streets, and the world may move forward, yet the shadows of that day and the enduring search for truth will never fully disappear.